students of class 8, welcome to this first class after the pandemic. Before the pandemic, we had finished 3 lessons: and bakes a cake, in the bazaars of Hyderabad, a poem by Sarojini Naidu, and saving the Ghadial. So today I would like to teach you lesson 3, chapter 3, page 26 in your English-1 textbook, called Gogol'S First Day by Jhumpa Lahiri. So Gogol's First Day is a story of a boy called Gogol. And before we go into Gogol's story, I would like to remind you also about your own experience of your first day in school. When you came to school and started your first day in nursery, what was the experience? I hope many of you remember what you did. So, in this story also, it is about a little boy called Gogol and the experience he had on his first day in school. So, the writer, Jhumpa Lahiri, she was an Indian-American author. And she is quite a renowned author because her first collection of stories called Interpreter of Maladies, which was published in 1999, won the Pulitzer Prize in 2000 for fiction. What is this Pulitzer Prize? It's a very renowned, it's a prize that is given to people who make big achievements in the field of fiction or newspaper journalism or even musical composition, and it is awarded by Columbia University. So I would also like to mention in this connection that this year, for 2020, the Pulitzer Prize Award was awarded to 3 Indian journalists. Their names are Dar Yassin, Mukhtar Khan, and Chani Anand in the field of feature photography. They all work for the Associated Press. So it is a matter of pride that our Indian journalists are also winning this prize called the Pulitzer Prize. So Jhumpa Lahiri, she won it in 2000 for this first short story collection called The Interpreter of Maladies. And in brief, to talk about her personal life, Jhumpa Lahiri was born to Indian immigrants. They are originally from Calcutta. They are Bengali, and her parents were settled in America, and she therefore is called an Indian American. So, as opposed to Indian American, there is another term called American Indian. I just want to explain the difference between these two. So, an Indian American is an Indian, somebody from the country of India who immigrates to America and becomes a citizen there. But on the other hand, an American Indian is the original indigenous inhabitant of America. I hope you understand that difference. Okay, so now we will go to the story, Gogol's First Day. This story, Gogol's First Day, is an extract. It has been taken from The Namesake. Okay, it's the first novel written by Jhumpa Lahiri, and this has been taken from that novel. So, who is Gogol? Okay, so here I have written the author Jhumpa Lahiri, the characters. In any story, there are characters, and the main character, of course, as the name indicates, is Gogol. Okay, and then Gogol, and then his father, whose name is Ashok, his mother Ashima, and Candace Lapidus, the principal of Gogol's school. So Gogol Ganguly, okay, that's his full name. Okay, if people ask your full name, so Gogol Ganguly is his surname, is a young Bengali boy who lives in America. he is about to start going to school for the first time. His parents, Ashok and Ashima, tell him he will be called Nikhil when he is in school. Gogol has never been called Nikhil before, and he cannot understand why his parents have made this decision. I'm sure many of you can understand this because I think all of you have pet names at home. In Manipuri, we have terms like Bungo, Sana. In Bengali, we have Babu. So, in this case, Gogol is not used to the name that his parents tell me he will be called in school. And what is that name? Nikhil. So, he cannot understand why his parents have made this decision for him to be called Nikhil in school. He is not used to it. Okay? So, I will just read through the story, the first paragraph, and then I will briefly explain it. Gogol doesn't want a new name. He can't understand why he has to answer to anything else. Why do I have to have a new name? He asked his parents, tears springing to his eyes. It would be one thing if his parents were to call him Nikhil too. But they tell him that the new name will be used only by the teachers and children at school. He is afraid to be Nikhil, someone he doesn't know and who doesn't know him. His parents tell him that they each have two names too, as do all their Bengali friends in America and all their relatives in Calcutta. It's a part of growing up, they tell him, part of being Bengali. They write it for him on a sheet of paper. Ask him to copy it 10 times. Don't worry, his father says. To me and your mother, you will never be anyone but Gogol. So this is the first paragraph of the story. And here what do we see? We see that before Gogol goes to school, it's already off to a bad start because he doesn't want the name that his parents want him to have in school, that is Nikhil. It even makes him feel emotional. He has, in the third sentence it says, tears were springing to his eyes when he questioned them, why do I have to have a new name? And then his parents reassure him that he's not the only one. Many of their Bengali friends in America and even their relatives in Calcutta also have the same thing. But he still does not understand why it has to be that way. And he's not very happy. Gogol is not happy about it. And then at the end, his parents reassure him, try to reassure him by saying, don't worry, even though at school you may be called Nikhil, at home you will still be Gogol to us. Now we'll come to the second paragraph. So Gogol and his father goes to school. At school, Ashok and Gogol are greeted by the secretary, Mrs. McNabb, who asks Ashok to fill out a registration form. He provides a copy of Gogol's birth certificate and immunization record, which Mrs. McNabb puts in a folder along with the registration. This way, Mrs. McNabb says, leading them to the principal's office. The name on the door says Candace Lapidus. Mrs. Lapidus is a tall, slender woman with short, white blonde hair. She looks at the registration form and smiles kindly at the boy who is clutching his father's hand. So here, what do we see? We see that Ashok, Gogol's father, and Gogol, the two of them, are in their school, in his school. And then with the secretary. So here, I would like to add the name of Mrs. McNabb as also one of the characters. Who is Mrs. McNabb? She is the secretary, and she makes them fill out a registration form, kind of like an admission form, and Ashok, the father, Gogol's father, also provides his birth certificate, his immunization record to fill in all that details in the registration form. After they finish that, Mrs. McNabb takes them to the principal's office. And as we can see, as it is described in this para, Mrs. McNabb is a kind, she seems to be a kind person. She smiles at Gogol kindly. And Gogol, on the other hand, is still nervous. He clutches his father's hand. Clutches means to hang on to in a tight way, because he's here in school for the first time. And already we know how he feels about being called Nikhil. Now we'll go to the next page, page 27, and we'll read through some of the other paragraphs. Welcome to elementary school, Nikhil. I'm your principal, Mrs. Lapidus. Gogol looks down at his sneakers. Here, sneakers, as you know, are his shoes. The way the principal pronounces his new name is different from the way his parents say it. The second part of it longer, sounding like heel, Nikhil. We all know that Americans speak English differently than we Indians do. She bends down so that her face is level with his and puts her hand on his shoulder. Can you tell me how old you are, Nikhil? When the question is repeated and there is still no response, Mrs. Lapidus asks, Mr. Ganguly, does Nikhil follow English? Of course he does, Ashok says. My son is perfectly bilingual. Okay, so here the principal, Mrs. Lapidus, she smiles at Nikhil and she wants to have a talk with him. And she asks him that question, how old he is. But it seems that Gogol does not respond to her question. So when he does not respond, Mrs. Lapidus asks the question again, a second time. And still, Gogol does not respond. He is not willing to answer that question. I think you know why? Because Mrs. Lapidus calls him Nikhil. But then, when she asks the father, when she asks Gogol's father if Gogol knows English, his father says, yes, my son is perfectly bilingual. Now, what is the meaning of the word bilingual? Bilingual means the ability to speak two languages. So, what are the two languages that Gogol knows? Of course, he's Bengali, so he knows his mother tongue Bengali, and of course he knows English as well. Para 8. In order to prove that Gogol knows English, Ashok does something he has never done before. He addresses his son in careful, accented English. Go on, Gogol, he says. Tell Mr. Lapidus how old you are. So here we see that the father is trying to make Gogol answer in English to the question that Mrs. Lapidus had asked about his age. What was that? Mrs. Lapidus says. That name you called him? Something with a G? Oh, that is what we call him at home only. But his good name should be is, he nods his head firmly, Nikhil. Mrs. Lapidus frowns. I'm afraid I don't understand. Good name? Yes. So here what do we see? We see that when Gogol's father talked to him and told Gogol to tell Mrs. Lapidus his age, she noticed that his father calls him Gogol, and she questions his father. And then what does his father say? Oh, it's the name that we call him at home. But his good name, Okay, mark this phrase, good name should be or is Nikhil. Now what is this term good name? It's also very typical in our country. We have pet names and we have good names. So in your textbook, there are several word meanings that are given, and I would like you to go through that also as you go through the story. What is a good name? Let me read it out. A custom in West Bengal and Bangladesh. 2 names are given to each person. A good name which is used in all legal documents, and a nickname which is used by family and friends. So here, Gogol's good name is Nikhil. That is what his father tells Mrs. Lapidus. But for Mrs. Lapidus, it is something new, because in America that is not the way it is. They all have just one name. So she says, I don't understand. What is this good name? So what does she do? Para 13. She studies the registration form. Remember the form that they had filled up when they came to school. She has not had to go through this confusion with the other 2 children in the school. It had not happened. Even though they were Indians, she has not had this problem before. She opens up the folder and examines the immunization record and the birth certificate. There seems to be some confusion, Mr. Ganguly, she says. According to these documents, your son's legal name is Gogol. So what happened is, in his birth certificate and in the immunization record, his parents had listed his name as Gogol. Okay, so here I would also like to just briefly tell you the background of this. In the Bengali custom, it seems that until the grandfather of a child gives the good name or the legal name, the parents usually refer to him by the pet name or the nickname. So it seems that till this time, Gogol's till the time that his birth certificate and his immunization record were being filled up or were being maintained, the grandfather had not yet given his good name Nikhil. So his parents had filled in his name as Gogol in his immunization record and also in the birth certificate. So Mrs. Candace, the principal, notices this. That is correct. But please allow me to explain, his father said. That you want us to call him Nikhil? Mrs. Candace replied. That is correct. Mrs. Lapidus nodded. The reason being, why? Why do you want us to call his name Nikhil? That is our wish, Ashok said. I'm not sure I follow you, Mr. Ganguly. Do you mean that Nikhil is a middle name or a nickname? Many of the children go by nicknames here. On this form there is a space. So she was showing them there's a space where they could fill in a nickname. No, it's not a middle name, Ashok says. He's beginning to lose his patience. He has no middle name. The boy's good name, his school name is Nikhil, the father says. But Mrs. Lapidus presses her lips together and smiles. But clearly he doesn't respond. Here he referring to Gogol. She can understand that Gogol does not like his name Nikhil. Please, Mrs. Lapidus, Ashok says. It is very common for a child to be confused at first. I assure you, he will grow accustomed. Okay? So the father is pleading with the principal not to change it from Nikhil to Gogol, even though in his birth certificate and in the immunization record, his name has been listed as Gogol. We can also see that Mrs. Lapidus understands what Gogol is thinking and she sympathizes with him. But for today, we will end here. This is up to para 22. In the next class, we will see what happens to the rest of the story. What happens to Gogol as he get away with being called Gogol in school or does it have to be changed to Nikhil? How did the day end? So, students, I hope you are taking care of yourself and enjoying the time that you have with your family. At the same time, I would like to encourage you to go through the story yourself. Okay, in the next class we will finish, and then I will also give you some work to do after we finish it in the next class. Thank you.
Stay home, stay safe, do it for yourself, do it for your family, do it for India. Let's break the chain of